Okay, good evening, everybody. We're going to do a quick review of 8.1, and then I'm going to teach you 8.2 today. 8.1 is the one we did a couple days ago, and then we'll start doing some practice on it. Okay, so the first thing I want us to be able to do is when we look at a number line, we should be able to write an inequality for it. And remember, I gave you a very specific way that I like to do it. If you follow the ways that I show you do it, I promise you, you will always get the right answer. It's super slick. So the first thing I want us to remember to do is when you have a number line inequality solution, underneath the dividing point, we write that number, which is 4. Okay, in this case. Under the line over here, we write our variable, which is x. If you do those first two things, you have to do both of those things. You have to put the dividing point under the number, or the number on the dividing point, and the x under the line. If you do those two things, then your answer is always going to be less than. And then the last thing we got to check is go back, we look at our original dot or donut. Since it was a donut, it should not be equal to. Therefore, this is my answer right here. The inequality is the answer. Okay, we look at the next one. And I see that I'm going to do the same thing. Underneath my dividing point, I put my number. So that's -3. Under my arrow or my line, I put my variable. So that's x. I'm not going to put the x on this side. That's not underneath this arrow right here. Underneath this line right here is where I put my x. It doesn't go on the left side. It has to go on the right side for this one. So if I do those two things, then I always use the less than symbol. And then the last thing I do is I see this one with a dot, therefore this needs to have the equal to sign. What I don't want you to think is that this arrow right here always goes to the right. It just so happens that 2 examples I did went to the right, but you'll see we did some yesterday or the other day, and you'll see some will go over to the left. These two happen to go to the right. That's just a coincidence. Okay. Now, this one, they want me to do the graph. They're giving me the inequality, and they want me to draw the graph. So that's okay, no big deal. I'm going to draw my graph like this, and I put 0 in the middle so I have some reference. And then on the number line, I have to put my dividing point. Remember, this right here is my dividing point. This separates the correct answers from the incorrect answers, right here at -7. So somewhere on my dividing line, I'm going to put the number -7. It has to go on the left-hand side of my 0 because that's where the negatives are. Then I need to plot a dot or a donut. When I look at this one, I see that because this does not have an equal to sign underneath it, and it's just this symbol, then I'm going to put a donut. Okay? Now, the next thing I have to do is I have to test a point. And you can never test this point right here. You can't test your dividing point. So I like to test 0. So I'm going to come up here, and I'm going to plug in 0 for my x, and then I have -7 and that symbol. Hopefully we know what that symbol says. That symbol is not an L, it's a G, or it's the symbol that makes a G. So -7 is greater than 0. -7 is greater than 0. Is that true or false? Well, hopefully we all know that -7 is not greater than 0. It's false. Therefore, this is false. The 0 is false. The side of the number line with 0 is false. If this side is false, that means that this side over here must be true. One side will be false. The other side will be true every time. So, if that's the case, then my arrow always goes towards the true side. It goes away from false and towards the true. So that would be the graph that goes along with that inequality. Okay, now we're going to take a look at some inequalities, solving them. Okay, so here we have 6 plus x is less than or equal to 6. Okay, so the first thing I want you to do, I have several steps of this, and I want you to do all the steps every time. So number 1 is, and you're not going to want to do this step, you think it's a stupid step. Trust me, you'll make far fewer mistakes if you just do this step. It's not a hard step, but it is a step that will help you. And that is to change to an equal sign. So the very first thing you do is you're going to rewrite this inequality into this. 6 plus x equals 6. You are not going to want to do that. You're going to think that's a stupid step. You think, I'm too smart to have to do that. I shouldn't have to do that. Trust me, if you follow this procedure, you will make less mistakes and you will get more right than you would have if you don't. It's a little thing to do. It helps out a lot when they get more complex. Okay, so there we go. There's my first step. Then, the next thing is, step 2 is, number 2 is find your dividing point. Remember, DP stands for dividing point. If you don't know that, write it out in your 5th color, dividing point. And basically what that means is solve the equation. Okay, so to get x by itself, I need to subtract 6 from both sides. So on the left-hand side, I get x, and the right-hand side, I get 0. So this is my dividing point. My dividing point is equal to 0. My next step is graph. Okay, so I'm going to graph it. So there's my number line. I'm going to put 0 here. And this time, my dividing point is 0. So since my dividing point is 0, on my 0 is where I'm going to put my dividing point. And I come back up here and I see that this original inequality has the equal sign to it. Therefore, that means I'm going to be using a dot. Now, the next thing we have to do is test. Remember, I can never test my dividing point, so I have to test a number on this side of it or on this side of it. Since I have a choice, I'm always going to pick the positive ones if I'm not testing 0. So I'm going to plug in for x any number that's on the right-hand side. So I'm going to plug in number 2. Alright, so there we go. So we say that 6 plus 2 is, and now here's a critical thing, I have to come back and use the original inequality up here, that symbol, not the equal sign, the inequality. I use that symbol there, that there. So 6 plus 2 equals 8, and this says 8 is less than, because that's an L, 8 is less than 6, which is false, which means this side is false. If this side is false, that means this side must be true, and my line always goes toward the true side. Okay, so there we go. That's my true side over there. The last thing I need to do, step 4, is write the inequality. Okay, so just like we did in the very first slide, underneath my arrow, I put my variable. Underneath my number, or under my point, I put my number. If I do those two things, I always use the less than symbol. And in this case, because it has the equal to sign, it should be equals to. This is my answer right here. The graph and that are my answer combined. You can't forget to do that last step. All right, take a look at the next one. Okay, so I'm going to go a little quicker this time. I'm not going to write out each step. You should write out each step, but I'm not going to. So the very first thing that I need to do is to set equals to equal sign. X plus 3 equals -7. Then I need to find my dividing point. So I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides. So I get x is equal to -10. Then I'm going to plot or graph. So here's my number line like this. There's my 0. Because this is negative, that needs to be to the left of my line. So I'm going to put it over here, -10. I need to plot my dot or my donut. So I'm going to put that here too, and then put dot or donut. And since that right there is a not have an equal to sign, that means it's going to be a donut. And then the last thing I need to do is test a point. Then I'm going to test. So I go back to the original inequality right up here. And I'm going to say, I cannot pick my dividing point, but I can say 0 is plus 3 greater than -7. And that is true. That means 0 is true. That means my line goes towards the true side. So then my final answer is -10, that goes there, Under my line goes x. That means the less than. X is less than or equal, not equal to, sorry, less than 10. Okay, I'd like you to do this last problem on your own. So see if you can do the same steps I just did and graph it on your own. Okay, so if you graphed it correctly, this is what you would have come up with, dividing point of 6. And the 0 side was true over here. So I put my x under my arrow, dividing point, number under my dividing point, and then I always use the less than symbol. Because it was a dot, I put in the equal to sign down there. Okay, so I will see you guys on Monday. Have a great weekend, and see you later.